The Queens Bombers, the New York Yankees, what do we call the New York Mets, who have added another former Yankee into the fold as they sign Luke Weaver to a 2-year, $22 million deal. You're watching Mets Daily, and I'm your host, Jake Brown. Make sure you smash that thumbs up on this video right now. Hit that subscribe button. We're about to be at 2,900, guys. Keep sharing the channel. We're about to be at 3,000. Would love to be at 3,000 on Christmas. That is next week. We are mid-Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah to our Jewish viewers and listeners, and a happy holiday season to all. As Christmas is in a week, we'd love to be at 3,000 a week. So subscribe, smash that thumbs up, subscribe to my YouTube at Jake Brown Live, and follow me on X, on Instagram, and on TikTok at Jake Brown Live. And please, we saw a few new members. Keep on scanning that code, $5 a month, holiday season. Makes a great gift. Become a Mets Daily Insider member. As going to next season, we will do giveaways. Remember, we gave away tickets last year. We're going to give away tickets. A lot of fun. Mets Daily Insider, more content coming on that channel after the holiday season. Luke Weaver, another former Yankee, into the fold. As we're about to record, figuring out what we wanted to talk about today, news happened. It seems like that's a tale as old as time with me in this show. When you're doing a show daily, it's a tough cycle of, all right, we're about to record, but wait, I feel something coming, and boom, there it is. So, listen, I know a lot of people are going to say, Luke Weaver's not that good. What are we doing here? You got to look at Luke Weaver's body of work a little bit different than other relievers out there. Luke Weaver was a starting pitcher for his entire career up until 2024, where that was his first year as a reliever. In his first year as a full-time reliever, Luke Weaver pitched really well for the Yankees in 2024. 84 innings, a 2.89 ERA, a 7-3 record. He struck at 103 guys in 84 innings. He was one of the better relievers in the sport in his first season as a reliever. 2025, not as good. 3.62 ERA, 64 and 2/3 innings, 72 strikeouts. But you have to remember, Luke Weaver was dominant for the first 6 to 7 weeks of the season. He then had a pretty significant hamstring strain and probably came back incredibly too soon from that. And he struggled after that point in the second half of the season. So you take last season's numbers with a little bit of a grain of salt. Also, Yankee Stadium isn't kind to pitchers. We know everything about that ballpark. It's a bandbox. I think coming to Citi Field, he stays in New York. He's proven that he can pitch in New York. I don't think this is a crazy number. It came minutes after the Phillies just signed Brad Keller to the same exact contract. So that is the going rate for these middle relievers. 2 years, $22 million. Brad Keller, similar story. A guy that was a starting pitcher his whole career, transitional reliever, and really had his first, same time as Luke Weaver, really had his first great season as a reliever this year. He was fantastic for the Cubs, and he turned that into a nice contract for himself. Luke Weaver, same thing, just transitioned last year to reliever, and he's turned it into a nice contract for himself. So I get it. When you lose Edwin Diaz, you're expecting, all right, give me Mason Miller or bust. But the reality is the Mets aren't going to break the bank when it comes to the greatest prospects or a boatload of money to go get someone like an Edwin Diaz at this point. They're trying to put together an overall better bullpen, and I think Luke Weaver's a good step in that. And I know that people are going to joke, look at all these Yankees you're taking from the Mets, but hey, if they're a good player, who cares where they came from? I understand it, and you're completing like the Infinity Stones if you go out and sign Cody Bellinger next. You got Juan Soto, Clay Holmes, Luke Weaver. Is there going to be Bellinger next? If it's not, you throw Carlos Mendoza in that category if you want to include a coach. So, yeah, ex-Yankees coming to Queens, but I think the Mets are saying to themselves, you know what? We like a guy that can have success in this market. So I don't hate that. It's happened with Doc. It happened with Darryl. It's happened in the past with guys going to the Yankees or vice versa, and winning in either or both markets. So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. I don't hate this Luke Weaver deal. He's not much of a ground ball pitcher. He does strike a lot of guys out. He averages over a strikeout an inning. I think the Mets like his strikeout stuff. They like the same thing about Devin Williams, a guy who strikes out a lot of guys. A guy who averages more than a strikeout per inning. So I know Yankee fans will say, really wasn't that decent of a season. But when you look at his overall numbers and you factor in the fact that he came back 3 weeks from a significant hamstring strain, I think we got to give him the benefit of the doubt. And if he pitches anything like he does in 2024, this could end up being a steal for the Mets. But I think what this tells you is a couple things. They're out on Pete Fairbanks. I think this was the kind of Fairbanks-like move. I think it tells you that Devin Williams is the closer. And we got to see if A.J. Minter comes back healthy. Listen, if A.J. Minter comes back healthy, he is a significant piece of this bullpen that we did not get to see much of last year. We got to see him for a week, and he was done for the year. So there's a chance he's back opening day. It might be a little bit later for A.J. Minter. But, man, I think it's a decent start when you talk about Williams, Weaver, Minter, Raley, probably Brazoban. You think about who else completes the rest of this Mets bullpen. Dylan Ross, I think, if not opening day, soon after, is going to be a part of this bullpen for the Mets. I do see Dylan Ross playing a factor. Dickie Lovelady, probably not. And I do think the Mets are going to have a starter be a reliever. Now, could it be Clay Holmes? Clay Holmes, they've just announced as we're recording this, he will pitch for Team USA in the upcoming WBC in 2026. I know Mets fans don't love hearing anything WBC related. But I think what this tells you is that there is a chance, depending on who the Mets out of the rotation in free agency or trade, that the Mets could use one of these starters in the bullpen. I honestly would like to see Holmes go back to the bullpen. I think in the second half, he kind of wore out. He clearly can't go more than 5 innings too often. I'd love to see Holmes be that guy, but when you look at the depth chart and you look at the Mets kind of pitching staff here, and we'll talk about the starters in a second, as of now, if you don't trade anyone, you have Peterson, Holmes, McClain, Manaea. You have Christian Scott coming back. You have Tong and Sproat still here. Now, Tong, I expect to either get traded or start the season in AAA. If Sproat sticks around, I expect him to have a chance to crack this rotation. And you have Kodai Senga. So you're talking about the Mets already have 8 starters on paper. I would think one of them ends up being a reliever. I'm going to be fascinated who it is. Now, McClain, we know, is obviously staying in the rotation. And if Peterson stays, we'll see. He's got 1 year left. I could see him being a reliever, but remember, they already have Raley and Minter and lefties and Lovelady if you want to throw them in the fold. So we'll see what the Mets do, but I see that. And then the other way to address it, if you want to talk about one more spot, and I think the Mets need one more, is that trade with the Padres we talked about, the rumored trade. Adrian Morejon. This is the guy who's one of the better relievers in the sport in 2025, just over a 2 ERA. Really, really good reliever, under team control for just one season, so he would be essentially a rental. But if Mason Miller, the asking price is too high. Now, Miller's the obvious. Like, if you get Miller, you could argue the Mets have one of the best bullpens in the sport. If you get Morejon, you can also argue that the Mets have one of the deeper bullpens in the sport. So either way, a deal with the Padres for one of those two, and you're talking about a pretty damn good Mets bullpen. If you get Jeremiah Estrada, not as exciting. But I think the addition of a Miller or a Morejon completes this Mets bullpen, including the addition of a starter becoming a reliever. Speaking of starting pitching and the Padres, Michael King, the Mets and Yankees reported to have interest in. He's also a former Yankee, as we know. Michael King, it's looking like commanding somewhere around a 4-year deal. I think the Mets could very much be interested. I'm sure, knowing their plan and Stearns and everything that they've been going by, the Mets are going to maybe offer 3 years with a 4th-year option, maybe some deferred money. I'm curious. I think Michael King, what we worry about is injuries. He was hurt in 2025, missed half the season, had 15 starts. The year before, he was sensational in 30 starts with a 2.95 ERA. Michael King, another guy. This is a guy that transitioned from a reliever to a starter. Same with Clay Holmes. Weaver transitioning from starter to reliever. So the Mets like to work with these guys. They're trying to have Carl Edwards go from a reliever to a starter, who they signed to a minor league contract. It's becoming more common in the sport. Now, listen, I think it depends on the price. If you're telling me Michael King is 4 years for $100 million, I think that's a bit of an overpay. But if you get Michael King 4 years, $80 million, I don't think that's crazy. A 3-year deal with a 4th-year option, I think that would be their big move. I don't think they're going to be in on Framber Valdez in 6 or 7 years, like we've seen guys. They're keeping it shorter term. I think Bellinger could end up being an exception. But in terms of pitching, I don't think they're giving out those 6-7-year deals, 5-year deals even. So I think King would be a good ad for the Mets. I think you talk about King, you talk about maybe moving Senga, moving someone to the bullpen, and I think that would make the Mets pitching staff complete. Again, a lot of people want to add 1 million starters. The Mets have 8 starting pitchers on paper right now. So they don't really have room to add a bunch of starters. I think Michael King would be the starter ad, and that's it for the rotation. You have to continue to remember Christian Scott's return and a full year of Nolan McClain. I think a lot of people just forget about Nolan McClain was only here for 6 weeks. You are now having a full season of Nolan McClain, Cowboy Ohtani, Lightning McClain, whatever you want to call him. He's here for a full year. So factor that in when you think about the rotation. You're watching Mets Daily. Smash that thumbs up. Hit that subscribe. Keep on commenting below. Let's go to your comments from Tuesday's show from Mets Daily Insider member Marielle. 1973, I wish there was a train I could take. Also, last time I checked, there was no elevator at Willets Point. Don't relish walking up and down those stairs. Please correct me if I'm mistaken. I'm not sure. I hope there's an elevator. I think you're talking about the apartment buildings, which I applied for that lottery across from Citi Field. If that's the case, I'm not a huge fan. I don't know if you mean the train or you're talking about the apartment building, but that's not great if there's no elevators. Kenneth Flood says, what about sign Bregman and Beatty at first? Beatty's never played first, and Bregman's agent is Boris. It's going to be a massive contract. So I really don't see either of those. Polanco is already a risk putting him at first, but now you're going to move Beatty over there. I think Beatty's really gotten a stranglehold of learning second, learning third, that you keep him where he's comfortable. Don't move him out of position. So I would not be a big fan of that. Felix says, hello, what about Luis Arraez? Luis Arraez hits a lot of baseballs. He gets his hits, but the problem is Luis Arraez is not a good defensive player, and he also doesn't get on base a ton. He's a guy who'll hit 300 with a 330 on base, and I don't see why the Mets would be interested in that. And he also doesn't steal. Like, if he was a stolen base machine and he was in 300, great. But because he's not that fast, doesn't play great defense, and doesn't get on base enough, I don't think the Mets are going to have interest in Luis Arraez. From Ricky Mambo, before they DFA Vientos, let's move him. I don't think Vientos is going to get DFA'd. He's either here or he's getting traded. I think he's good enough to be in the big leagues. I just don't think he's a fit on this current Mets plan and their roster with how slow he is and how positionless he is. So I don't think it's a DFA of Vientos. I think he's either a part-time DH or he's traded, and I lean towards the fact he gets traded. From Doc 20, easier to part with Vientos with how well Beatty performed last year. Also, Mauricio is so talented. Yeah, Mauricio is another name that has come up in trade talks. I'm a little hesitant to give up on Mauricio a little bit too early. I think he provides a little bit more than Vientos does in terms of playing multiple positions. Remember, he started as a shortstop, so he's a backup shortstop. He does have speed. I think last year was a little bit slower as he came back from the ACL tear. Excuse me. So I would rather keep Mauricio, but I do think he has value in a trade. I'd be surprised if they traded Beatty at this point. I would think Beatty gets more value, though. So if you're talking about Beatty in like a Mason Miller deal, fine. But if you're talking about Beatty in a Luis Robert deal, no thank you. Like, I do think Beatty has showed you some value. Interesting, Beatty just came up on my TikTok feed. His girlfriend, they were with a Broadway actress at Joe's Pizza. And I got to say, I work next to Joe's now at Times Square area, where my office is, and most overrated pizza place. Why would you wait 30 minutes for pizza it's good, but it's not the best pizza in New York? So that is a real tourist trap. From Rob McGravy Train. Cool username. I just dropped $130 on a Vientos City Connect. What are you doing, Rob? Terrible investment. I hope we keep him. Who is playing first? If Polanco, then DH spot is still open. Don't want to see Mark until we fill that last spot at least. Well, if you go to my TikTok, in my TikTok showcase, there are cheaper City Connect jerseys. Now they're the fake ones, but they pretty much look exactly the same for like $20. So go to Jake Brown Live on TikTok and get one of those. But yeah, I mean, I get it. You're loyal because you got a jersey, but the reality is he's just too slow and he just doesn't play defense. That with the addition of Jorge Polanco, I don't see the need for Mark Vientos. From Stan, he says the Mets aren't a playoff team. Luis Robert would be considered the big move. Yes, it is currently December 17th. So I understand you look at the Mets roster right now. No, they're not a playoff team. But luckily, the season's in 3 months. And I don't think Luis Robert would be considered their big move. From Type 2 Collectibles, I feel like you hate this team and getting all new players is the best thing since sliced bread. But I guess that's opinion pieces. I mean, I don't know. Type 2 Collectibles. 1, how could I hate this team? I go to 50 games a year. I do a show about this team every day. I've sat everywhere in that stadium. I've interviewed every man. I'm not like trying to, maybe that sounds like a humble brag, but my life has been too far invested in this team for you to actually think I hate the New York Mets. I live and breathe New York Mets baseball. To be able to do this show every day and make the very minimal amount of money I make doing this show every day tells you I have to care about the subject, and I care about the subject. So I'm offended that you think that too. These were a bunch of losing players, and I know people got mad that I called them losers, but they were. They did not win. They're not loser people, but they're losing players. So I'm tired of people being fine with losing. Let's try and win. And it took a shakeup. Oh, they weren't part of the losing. They were here since 2019. You could pinpoint each team and say this. You want to go through each year, 2019, it was this guy that did it. It was this guy. It's a collective effort. I'm not just talking about 2025 and the collapse. I'm talking about this core unit has not won a damn thing. Even 2022, that team was good until August and then fell on their face, lost the division, and then lost in the wild card. So as fun as that regular season was, all we have to remember is the wild card banner that we're putting up. Excuse me, which is a topic now because the Knicks are not hanging the banner. Shout out, let's go Knicks. Winning the NBA Cup, but no banner. And the Mets are putting a wild card. I'm sick of putting up wild card banners at Citi Field. I want a World Series banner, and those guys didn't do it. So it's time for you all to get over those Mets. They're gone. Stop comparing who they get to who they add. They're gone. They never won a damn thing. So if you had fun all those losing years, shout out to you. I didn't. I want to win. Peter Mango says, Viento's going to be really good. 40 homer, some team going to get lucky. Mauricio ditto. Listen, Here's what I read a lot of from you guys and just from people in general. It's not all about just how many home runs a guy hits. And for the millionth time, I'll point to the 2025 Toronto Blue Jays. Go through that roster and see how many home runs they hit. They didn't hit many home runs. And they were, almost won the World Series. So I see too many people. I know we love home runs, but it's not just about how many home runs a guy hits. It's about putting the ball in play, hitting in the clutch like Jorge Polanco does, moving runners over, which the Mets were horrible at in 2025, not striking out a lot like a guy like Yandy Diaz, who I want. So stop looking at just home runs and just RBIs. It's about other metrics as well, and I'm not an analytics guy. I hate it. I get the nerd stuff people don't like, but the reality is moving guys over, getting on base, OPS plus, WAR, all that stuff does factor into decision-making in the front office. It's not just about home runs. And unfortunately, Mark Vientos doesn't get on base at a 33% clip, and he's the slowest player in baseball. So to me, I don't think Mark Vientos gives you enough just because he might hit 30 home runs. And on that, Jay Martinez says, hey, buddy, Vientos is way slower than Pete Alonso. It's not even close. Yeah, I mean, listen, it would be a foot race. It would be close between those two. Dana Abrahams, newest Mets Daily Insider member. Thank you so much. Or Dan Abrahams, excuse me. Thank you, Dan, for becoming a member. I wish we had gone for Garcia like the Phillies have. Listen, Adolis Garcia for $10 million. Yeah, I think it's a good deal. I don't think the Mets like the rate he strikes out at. Like, he is a strikeout machine, and the Mets want someone who gets on base a little bit better of a clip, strikes out a little bit less. But, yeah, I mean, that's a good deal for the Phillies in that ballpark. Adolis Garcia. I wouldn't have hated giving him $10 million. Joe Jacobs says Vientos pop, not worth keeping around. He's slower than a turtle and is horrible at fielding. Yes, listen, he's not a fielder and he's slow, so I agree. One-dimensional player. Mets Forever says Luis Robert, like you said, just needs to change the scenery. Agree with Vientos. He should be traded. Very inconsistent. Yeah, Luis Robert has the makings of someone that could get back to the player he was a few years ago. Maybe the change of scenery does it. I'm not giving up a lot for him, but if you can't get a Bellinger, I would talk to the White Sox, but he's not towards the top of my list. And we'll close away with this. Randy says he can't be worse than Cedric Mullins. 100% correct, Randy. No, he cannot. This is Mets Daily. I'm Jake Brown at Jake Brown Live. Smash that thumbs up. Keep subscribing. We're almost at 3,000. And scan that code. Become Mets Daily Insider. Remember, cheaper than a cup of coffee. Just $5 a month. Happy Hanukkah. Happy holidays. And we'll talk to you tomorrow right here on Mets Daily.